record this. Okay, cool. All right, cool. All right, so we are into week 12. This is our final week of the program. So for this week, we're going to be covering the last section of the life teaching map, which is encourage and elevate others. So for the lessons for this week, we'll be getting into, when we're talking about encouraging and elevating others, we're really talking about influence. We're really talking about kind of the fundamentals of what leadership really is. And then we're talking about how to kind of build and foster communities. So when we're talking about influence, there's a couple aspects of dealing with influence. And the first part is just kind of handling people. So that's just kind of interacting with other people. And there's some things that you need to kind of understand when you're dealing with other people. And one of the main things is don't criticize, condemn, or complain. This is like the rule 1 in any like people management book, but it's also just kind of common sense. If you're trying to influence anybody, you don't want to start off by talking about the things that they're doing wrong. You're immediately going to put that person in kind of a defensive position, and they're not going to want to listen to anything you have to say after that. The second part is you have to actually give honest and sincere appreciation as kind of really the starting point. That's where you have to kind of build the level of rapport. And you do that by actually pointing out something that you're genuinely appreciative of. And then the last part here in terms of just handling people is you have to kind of actually stir up something that they actually want. So kind of activating others, this eager want is what it's called. So a lot of times people are working towards something, they want something out of what they're doing, and tapping into that and really getting in that mental framework of understanding them and what they're working towards is going to actually help in actually influencing that person. You're actually kind of helping them towards what they want to accomplish. Now, the second part in terms of dealing with influence is building rapport. Anytime you're dealing with building rapport with someone, you have to have a general interest in that other person. That's kind of the starting point. When we're talking about influence and just building that level of rapport, this is one that people kind of like sometimes forget. Body language, just smiling in general. Even if you're on the phone, this actually helps. It kind of provides this kind of like more welcoming type of aura when you're dealing with someone else. And a lot of times people will be saying something, but their body language will not reflect that. And that kind of creates this incongruence, which also tends to distance people, and they don't want to like really trust you if like you're saying something, but your body language is saying something completely different. So you have to make sure that those are in alignment. The next part is, people actually like to hear their name. I'd be careful with this one because sometimes people overuse it and then it becomes like a safety net where it's very obvious that you're using it just to build rapport. And it's like, okay, you said my name 5 times in a sentence, so just be aware of that one. Also, you got to be a good listener. And this is where you kind of want to encourage people to talk about themselves a little bit more. Anytime you're trying to build rapport with someone, you want to get that other person talking more so you can kind of build those threads, right? When you're thinking about a conversation, it's kind of like a table tennis match where you're, hitting that ball back and forth, and you want to have that other person kind of giving more opportunities for you to create more threads. So getting them to talk more is going to help. Also, you want to talk in terms of what they're interested in. I have one friend who will always jump into a conversation and then take it over. And then all of a sudden they're talking about something they're interested in, but it had nothing to do with what you were talking about. And all of a sudden you're like, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Right. So like, you gotta talk about what that person's actually interested in and kind of add to that conversation. You don't want to just jump in, take it over, and then like all of a sudden it's no longer about that person anymore. Right. And you also want to make this person feel important. And the key with this one is you have to do it sincerely. And a lot of times people will try to make that person feel important, but they'll do it in a way that's kind of manipulative or just in a way that's kind of like backhanded. So you want to make sure that anytime you're actually trying to build rapport, it starts with, actually caring about somebody. And then when we're talking about influence, the kind of last part is got a couple different parts, but it's a reaching an agreement. So really it's the negotiation element. When we're talking about influence, it's kind of almost winning that person over to what your idea is, your way of thinking, right? But there's got to be an agreement there. So the first part in that is you have to actually listen. And this is kind of about really that other person. You want to make that person feel like safe and create a level of trust and feel like their emotions are being validated. So in listening, you have to create that trust and safety kind of container in order for that real conversation to begin. If the person doesn't feel safe and trusted, they're not going to really open up to you. They're just going to give you kind of one word responses, and they're going to try to shut down. The next part is what's called using mirrors. This is kind of a term in like social psychology, but it's an element of kind of repeating what that person has said is like the last part of their sentence, just to help clarify it, or to get them to continue to talk about it. If they said something and you kind of repeat the last few words of what they said, it encourages them to continue to talk about it a little bit more, as if you're hearing what they're saying, but you want to know more without actually like probing too much. So the idea is you want to continue to get them talking more about their topic or their interest, or their position, so that way you can learn more about it. Oftentimes people will say something, but it needs a lot more clarity in like an explanation for you to understand really what they're trying to say. I mean, a lot of conversations, people misinterpret things, and that comes from that person saying one thing, but they maybe mean something else because they didn't have the chance to clarify it. So you want to give that person really enough of a kind of wide berth to be able to explain what they're really trying to get at, and then gradually work through it with them. And then this next part is you have to really empathize with them. And when we're talking about empathizing with them, you have to kind of see their situation from their perspective, but you also want them to see your position from your perspective as well. So it's kind of a mutual empathizing with each other. And that allows someone to kind of really clarify what the person's saying or feeling, and the person's going to be more inclined to be more open with you, and it's going to be less defensive. So one way to kind of do that is when you're listening to them, just continue to probe into what they're feeling, and you're going to kind of get to that point where they're like, oh yeah, that's right, because they're understanding that you're understanding where they're coming from, right? And it's very crucial that both sides understand where the other is coming from in order to move forward. If you don't know where that person's position is, you don't know really what they're feeling or their specific situation, it's very hard to build that level of rapport. This next tactic is called like labeling, and it's kind of a way to kind of short circuit a lot of rapport building. So when you're dealing with someone maybe that you're new with in maybe a negotiation, or someone that you're just meeting for the first time, oftentimes they'll bring up levels of emotions or circumstances that are somewhat familiar with a lot of people. So for example, like people tend to get up by their alarms a lot, and they kind of run out the door and they don't plan things out. So you can be like, oh yeah, that's like your alarm clock living. So you've given a label to that way of like interacting with the world, and it kind of short circuits that level of rapport, because you're like, oh yeah, that person understands where I'm coming from, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, right? Or when you're saying like, it seems like this, and this, because you're basically saying that you recognize that they care about something and you want to know more about it. So you're just kind of labeling like where they're coming from, and you're kind of just summarizing it in a way that shows that you're actually listening to them and that you have an understanding of what they're saying. And that's going to really kind of build that rapport with them, and it's going to allow them to kind of open up to you in a way that maybe they wouldn't before. And then the last part of any type of agreement or negotiation is that when we often get to yes or no, that's not necessarily the completion of the argument or the agreement. And oftentimes no is really just the beginning of the negotiation. The real issues usually get brought up once no has been kind of put on the table, because the no doesn't necessarily mean like that's the end of everything. It usually means that the person is maybe not ready at that point for whatever you're offering. You're making them feel uncomfortable by doing something wrong, so you got to fix that really quickly. Maybe they don't understand what you're saying, or you don't understand them, and then they could just need more information. There could be some kind of price objection there. Maybe they want something else and they need more information, or they just want to talk it over with someone else, or there could be an issue that they just don't trust you and you didn't do a good enough job to build that level of rapport and you jump too many steps. So just know that in any type of influence, reaching that agreement has a lot of different aspects, but when we're talking about influence in general, really the greatest and most influential strategy of all time is just to actually care about somebody. And you have to care about what they want, and you have to help them get to achieving what they want. That's really the baseline of any type of influential strategy, winning anybody over, is you have to actually care. And you have to be coming from an authentic place. You have to come from a place of actually wanting to better their lives or to help them in some way. So that would be the first takeaway for this part. And you'll see that when we're talking about influencing others, you're probably going to either have an leadership opportunity, or you'll be kind of thrust into the opportunity of, having to lead others. Now, when we're talking about leadership, there's about 12 kind of fundamentals that I've kind of gotten from this one retired Navy SEAL, Jocko Willink, who wrote this book, Leadership Strategies and Tactics. And this is kind of a brief summary of a lot of those things, but I just want to go through kind of what we're talking about when we're talking about leadership in general, because anytime you're talking about encouraging and elevating others or influencing others, it really, the foundation of a lot of that is leadership in many different capacities. So the first part is, when we're talking about leadership, you have to be humble. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a job where somebody has taken a leadership role or has been put in a leadership role, and they just thought they knew everything, and they just didn't want to take any advice, and they just kind of didn't respect the role of what it meant to actually lead other people. So you have to know that when you're taking any type of leadership role, whether you inherited it somehow or you worked your way into it, it's a privilege to lead other people, and people are counting on you to actually make the right decisions. You're responsible for other people, you're responsible for getting the job done, and with that comes a lot of weight of that responsibility. So you have to take that seriously, and you can't just kind of shirk that duty or just kind of pass the buck on this one. It's everything starts and ends with you as the leader. The next part here is you can't act like you know everything, because you definitely don't. In any type of leadership role, you're going to be put in situations where you're going to not know everything, and you're going to have to ask for help. And the team is going to know when you don't know something, but it's okay to ask questions and kind of, get into the weeds and actually understand where people are coming from. But you have to recognize that there are dumb questions when you do get to a leadership role. You have to know certain things. So you have to ask strategic and smart questions, and you have to actually, the next part is listen to people, right? So listen to people who are giving you advice, and when they actually give you advice, actually take it. So many people ask for advice in a leadership role, and then they never take it. So it kind of defeats the whole purpose of asking for advice if you're just sampling advice and you're just oh, this seems good. It's well, then why are you asking for advice if you're not going to use it, right? You need to actually apply it, and you need to just heed it. People who've been through certain circumstances, they have a framework, they understand certain things that maybe you don't, and you can learn something from that, and you can apply it. So try to apply it immediately and see if it works, and that's the best way to do it. And also, I'd just kind of add to this that you want to listen to people from up and down the chain of command. Just because someone's on a lower rank or a lower position than you doesn't mean that they don't have some type of valuable insight. I think that's one of the things that is often overlooked in a leadership role. Great ideas can come from anywhere. And the next part here is you want to treat everybody with respect. And that kind of is on the listening part as well. But everyone is an important part of the team, and you have to treat them as if they're a human being and they are important. I think that's one of the biggest components of leadership, is actually recognizing that each individual person plays an important role in your team, and that you all kind of succeed when everyone succeeds together, right? A rising tide lifts all ships, right? So just take care of your people, and they'll obviously take care of you. The next part here is just in terms of ownership. Whenever you make a mistake, you have to own that, and you have to know that with the leadership role, every decision that you make, whatever the outcome, is completely your responsibility. So when you fail, you need to take ownership of that. And when you succeed, you have to give that credit to the people that have helped you succeed. So that's kind of the next part here is, passing credit for success up and down the chain of command, right? Success is a team effort, and no one just does it by themselves. I've been at a lot of different companies where, the team works really hard, and then at the last minute, the, boss comes in, swoops the victory, and then basically pretends like, that person did all of the work, right? And it's that one's a little bit discouraging. You want to make sure that you're not just taking all of the spotlight from your team's success, that it is a team effort, and you need to give credit where credit's due. And the next part here is, working hard as a leader should be, par for the course. When we're talking about any degree of, let me go back here, any degree of leadership, there's an element of work that you have to put in. And just to frame it, you should be working harder than almost everybody on your team if you are in a leadership role. A lot of people think that just because they're in the leadership role that they can just kind of sit back and coast and kind of delegate and do nothing. And the reality is that when you're in a leadership role, you have to work as hard or even harder than some of the people on your team. And that's the hallmark of a good leader. And it's also, I'd even argue that you even need to get in with some of the people on the ground level and kind of do some of that work, so you recognize what people are going through, and you're not completely detached on the process as well. So you want to lead by example, right? So your hard work should be the hallmark of that team's success, and it should be, you should be, walking the talk and talking the walk, right? Everything should be in alignment. You shouldn't just be telling your team to work hard, but you're not working hard, right? That creates a huge misalignment, and you're going to lose respect from your team. The next part is, obviously you want to have integrity. So when we're talking about when you say something, you're going to do it and you're going to follow through with it. And I think one of the bigger things here, I mean, obviously you don't want to lie up and down the chain of command, but when we're talking about having integrity, it's whatever you decide to do, when you make that decision, actually follow through with it, because that's when you're going to learn from that decision. So the next part is just being balanced. This is more along the lines of being able to manage your emotions and kind of detaching a little bit emotionally from the process. A lot of times, managers are really involved in the process, and they take everything so personally when something doesn't go right. And this is where you have to learn to emotionally detach from the process. And this is the harder part, because it is a lot of your time and effort going into a project. But you have to know that there's a degree of emotional control that you have to have in leading other people. And also, you can't go to the extremes. So anytime you have an extreme action or extreme response or extreme opinion, it's usually not a good response, and it's usually detrimental to the team's success. Oftentimes, it's an overcorrection for a mistake, and there's usually an ego component there. The next part is you have to be decisive. So when we're talking about making decisions, being a leader, you have to just make one, and you have to see it through till the end. You're going to have to sometimes operate with not all of the best information, but you're going to have to make a decision. And the process of making that decision will create more of that competence and confidence in making decisions. So it's kind of that, chicken and egg thing. But you, in order to actually be better at making decisions, you just have to make more decisions, right? And it just becomes through seeing it through. You have to see patterns, and it's only through actually taking action and actually doing things that you're going to learn how to build that self-confidence to continue to make decisions. But the longer you hesitate, the less decisions that you make, the more you try to give it to somebody else, the less respect you'll get from your team, and also it'll kind of cripple your decision-making ability. So you want to keep that in mind. Just make a decision, see what happens in the end result, and learn from it, whichever way it goes. As a kind of leader, this is one of the biggest things that I think is overlooked, and that most people focus on the last part, which is getting the job done. But your role as a leader is actually, a hallmark of it is building relationships. Your main goal is to build relationships with everybody in that company, in that position, in that chain of command. So you're talking about up and down the chain of command. You want to have solid relationships with everybody and understand where they're coming from and build that trust and rapport with them. I can't tell you how many teams I've been on where it does feel like a disconnected, incoherent cluster of people, because there was no rapport built with everybody on that team. So everyone just kind of, did their own thing and operated individually, right? And you're all working towards a common goal. So that requires, deeper relationships with understanding how that person works, how that person, responds to different levels of critique and feedback. You just have to have that level of a relationship to understand how to move people from one position to another and actually move forward on a project. And that starts with just that level of rapport you have with that person. So if you haven't done the work of building that relationship with somebody, it's going to be very hard to motivate them, when you're in a time crunch, or you're in, you know, you're up against the wall in one of those adverse situations. So spend the time to really understand your team and really build the relationships, and you're going to see more success in terms of your leadership ability. And the last part here is, obviously, your job as a leader is to get the job done. That's one of the main reasons why you're there. So it goes back again to that, the responsibility of being a leader is to get the job done and to actually lead people and to accomplish something, right? So if you don't accomplish the mission, you're kind of failing as a leader. So performance does count. That's why you're there. So just know that there is a job to do. There is something you're focused on, and you need to get that done. There's plenty of ways to do it, but you just know that you're there to get a job done, and you have to make sure that it gets done in an efficient way. So second takeaway for today is that leadership is really about the team, and that the team is more important than you are. As leaders, people think that they're the most important person on the team, and it's really a group effort, and it comes down to building those relationships with the team and pulling that collective work towards that end mission, right? And as a leader, you are fully responsible for everything. So just know that at the end of the day, you're in that role, so you take ownership of everything that happens as the result, especially the negative. But you should, when you're succeeding, you should also give credit to your team, because it's a group effort. And the same goes for when you fail. You don't want to pass the buck on to somebody else and make somebody a scapegoat. You need to take ownership of that, because as the leader, you need to find a way to motivate your team to succeed. That is your role. So after a while of influencing other people and leading other people, you're going to find that maybe you're going to start moving towards building a following and ultimately working towards building a community, right? We're talking about building communities, elevating and encouraging others. There's a couple of tactics in terms of how to build an actual community. And the first one is just learning how to build a community in the beginning, first off. So as you can tell, we've gone through 12 weeks of this program. So you have to figure out what people need as the starting point of any community. And you have to look for kind of shared connections. Anytime we're talking about a community, it can't just be one half-baked idea. It really needs to go a little bit deeper, and there needs to be a shared connection that's actually bringing people together, and it needs to be kind of a need in a group of or organization, right? You want to find the right leaders to help you kind of with that mission. And like we were talking about before, going through those 12 checkpoints, leaders are about the people on the team. So it's finding that collective group with the shared interest, trying to provide a service for something that is needed, right? We're talking about building communities. Establishing symbols can oftentimes go a long way in terms of building a little bit more of the roots for that group. And this could be as simple as just having a inside joke or a way of connecting with each other, or just things that you talk about consistently. There's a lot of different ways to do this. You don't have to necessarily have a logo and colors and all wear certain things. This can be symbolic of something that means something to the group as a core value. So think of it as more of an idea rather than a physical thing. The second part of any time we're talking about building a community is actually gaining members. This is one of the harder parts, because when you're just starting out, it's tempting to just want to take everybody in because you're working toward the mission. But you have to be really strategic and have kind of a standard for what you're looking for and what type of person you want in that group. It's going to be important as your community tends to scale and grow a little bit. You have to be really clear on the person that you're looking for and ultimately what you want to accomplish with those people. The next part is you got to obviously gather like-minded people. So they have to be people who are going to help advance your mission and help kind of almost recruit other people. So kind of like brand ambassador people as well, like people who are going to be really focused on the mission that you have set forth for your community and just helping serve others. That should really be their focus. Any type of community needs to have some level of event organization. So just bringing people together for a common goal. Usually like you'll see this for like charities where people get together for supporting a local organization. Something that gives back to the community, that just helps other people um, with some type of need that they're working towards. So some level of service, right? And another element of gaining members is you really want to push for more meaningful conversations. Uh, Communities are really more about social interaction than anything else. So if you're creating a community and you're not, really deep diving into interacting and building that rapport with people, it's going to kind of fade because you're not going deep enough and you're not really tapping into that element that people really want to be a part of. People like being a part of something, some type of mission, something that's greater than themselves. And when you can kind of resonate with that, you're going to get people to stick around a little bit longer. Now, once you've kind of built that level of following, you're going to have to get to that next part, which is actually kind of maintaining the organization that has become the community, right? You'll have maybe some followers, and now you have to figure out, okay, do these people help advance my mission? Are they the right fit for what I'm working towards? Because as you grow bigger, maybe the people you started out with um, don't necessarily evolve with what you're working towards, and maybe they start becoming, not the best fit for where you're going in the future. So you have to all make decisions together, and this is going to be the part where maybe you're going to start losing some people because um, maybe you'll have differences of opinion, and it's okay to start weeding out some of those members because they might not be the best fit for your organization at that point. But you still want to allow equal participation and everyone has a voice in that community, because it does come back to making people feel as if they are appreciated and valued within this group. So you want to allow them to share their emotions and really allow them to resonate with whatever their service is that they're providing for the community, right? You start with kind of building towards a need, and that need will eventually evolve over time as you continue to fill that need. But you got to make sure that it still resonates with that kind of the symbols that you started out with, the foundational principles, and that you're actually working towards something, and that people are trying to deeply connect with each other. And the last part is, you have to be kind to your members. A lot of organizations, when they get bigger, they tend to kind of um, focus more on the mission and getting there any means possible, and they focus less on the people that are helping them get there. So you still want to do both, where you're focusing on the mission and providing the service and filling that need, but you don't want to forget about the members that have helped you get there, because with any leadership role, any type of influence, it comes down to actually caring and then actually remembering the people that are part of that journey with you. So the last takeaway here is that, communities exist to kind of support each other, learn from each other, and then ultimately inspire others to constantly improve. There's a quote by Everett Dickinson here. It's when all is said and done, the real citadel of strength and community is in the hearts and minds of desires of those who dwell there. Essentially, what he's saying is that it's about the people working towards a common goal, and it's the people who are ultimately helping you get there. So you have to remember that while there is a mission everyone's working towards, it's the people that are firm believers and supporters of that mission that are going to help you get there in the long run. So that kind of summarizes the champion life that we've been working towards. Obviously, the first 8 weeks were more on the champion side, and then the last 4 were on the life side. We just wrapped up week 12, which is the 4th week of the life teaching map. Again, encouraging and elevating others. We started kind of taking a lot of action, not moving really anywhere, just kind of working in a circle. And then we kind of raised our level of ambition and action, moved from just watching people take action, and then started actually chasing after what we wanted. But we're now focused on kind of a more directional path of working towards a better version of ourselves, becoming more of that leader and influential person in our community, ultimately leading towards that champion life. Now, week 12, kind of in summary here, when we're talking about encouraging and elevating others, it comes down to really 3 things: influence, leadership, and really building communities. You have to actually care about other people if you want to influence them. Um, any type of leadership role is more about the team than the leader, and it's about accomplishing that mission. any type of community we're talking about. It's all about kind of supporting and inspiring others. And it's all about the team working towards that mission, like we've been talking about. So for week 12, to round out this program, we're going into a virtual race. So I posted this in the Facebook group. This will be kind of just a straight run through of the movements. Every movement will be kind of back ended with a 0.5 mile run, so half mile run. You can use kind of a GPS tracker for this one, or you can just kind of go via like a track. If you're running on a track, basically, half mile on a track is about 2 laps roughly. I think 400 meters is roughly about a lap on a track. So you're looking at about 800 meters, give or take, for every time you see like a half mile run on this. So you'll just go straight through. So think of it as like 30 burpees, 2 laps on a track, 30 squats, 2 laps on a track, and you keep cycling through. The only things that are a little confusing, it's really like 60 lunges because it's left, right is basically a half. So right would be 1, or right is a half, left is a half to equal 1, total of really 60. Mountain climbers are also 60. So in total, you're looking at about 3 miles for your virtual race, kind of a good starting point, with about 30 push-ups and then about 60 of burpees, squats, lunges, and then mountain climbers. So it's manageable, just breaking that up. It's a good kind of run through and kind of mix up of some of the things that we've been seeing throughout this course, and then just kind of a good, check in to see where we're at after kind of this little bit of a mix up, right? So now that we kind of finished out this program, we're getting kind of the next steps, but we've got to kind of address a little bit of the elephant in the room here, which is that obviously there aren't any races right now. If you look at kind of the schedule, most of the races are pretty much postponed or canceled through about maybe August or September, realistically. I looked on the Spartan site earlier, and Spartan Race itself is actually furloughed about 75% of their staff. One direct quote from the CEO of Spartan Race was, "We took down salaries to barely sustainable levels for those who didn't get furloughed." So basically saying they're struggling right now, and it's that in between, unsure, not sure what's happening kind of time frame where everyone's still adjusting to obviously the pandemic, right? So this has kind of been the response that I've seen on a lot of the Spartan pages and a lot of the kind of obstacle racing community. They're like, "So you're saying there's a chance, right?" And the reality is that you're probably not going to race for the majority of this year. And I know that's going to upset a lot of people, but when we're talking about a global pandemic, there's really no guarantee until we get any type of vaccine. So you have to kind of get out of this framework that life is disrupting your racing. You have to get back into the framework of how can I find a sustainable routine to tap back into to continue my training, right? Now, whether you continue with obstacle course racing or not, what I really want you to walk away from with our interactions is knowing, what's holding you back in your health and fitness, just the ability to actually define what you want in a health and fitness, and actually have a clear vision of how to actually succeed in your health and fitness and move you towards your goals. So that's what I ultimately want you to accomplish, whether you continue to go into the next program or not. So just know that we're going to get to those elements, and I'm going to help you towards that in the next couple of weeks. So when we're talking about obstacle course racing, Spartan Race specifically, I think I've been talking with a few of my friends, and they said that they signed up for like the season pass. Spartan Race really isn't giving any type of refunds. They have a no refund policy as just a default. So if you have bought a bunch of races and you signed up for a bunch of them, they're pretty much only giving you 2 vouchers, one for the rest of 2020 and then one for 2021. And you're pretty much going to eat all the rest of your costs. That's just an operational decision they've made just to stay afloat. So just know that you're probably not going to be able to get any refunds if you have a lot of races on your calendar. They may get pushed back, but just don't expect them to give you a bunch of free races essentially. So just keep that in mind as you're going through all of this. Obviously, Spartan Race has about 7 million followers. So they're going to make it. It's going to be this transitional time where they're not sure when they can go to an event next. And, like we were saying, probably you're looking at a late year, maybe, where they're in some very specific limited amounts could potentially start up again. But I wouldn't count on it. If you're really banking on it, I would say try to find a sustainable routine that you can dive into that's going to allow you to continue to work on these skills without losing them, but without setting yourself up for that kind of, you know, ebb and flow of like, oh, I'm ready, and then I'm not ready, and then I'm not ready. You want to have a consistent level approach to fitness and your training. You don't want to just, keep imagining like there's going to be a race when there's not. So just in your mind, think of, okay, 2021, how can I prepare for that? And then how can I take a slower approach to that? When we're talking about the COVID crisis, we're talking about, over 105,000 deaths globally, almost 7 million people unemployed, 75% of restaurants, may not be back when we return from all of this. And, there's a very real reality that a lot of gyms could go out of business because of this. Until we get really a vaccine, there's really no guarantee for what's going to happen and what the next response is going to be. So you just got to keep that in mind. So another kind of perspective for this is just thinking about the frameworks that we've been working through just leading up to this and just generally throughout this program, right? It's been said that kind of money is like energy. It's kind of it's not really destroyed. It's either just transferred from one person or from business to business, right? And you can see this kind of in the current shift with a lot of what's happening right now. There's a lot of money leaving from traditional businesses and kind of flowing to like virtual office tools like, Zoom, Slack, Dropbox, all of these other ways of doing business. Business is still happening in certain aspects. It's just people are adapting really quickly and they're changing how that business is being done. Some traditional restaurants have pivoted to takeout and delivery. So they're still operating, but they're finding ways to still accomplish what they set out to do originally. They're just having to adjust the way that they do it, right? Movie theaters, you're seeing a lot of that attention shifting to gaming platforms, to more streaming services like YouTube, maybe Netflix. A lot of ways that we've normally done things have now shifted. And you're seeing just like millions of people just essentially being bored, stuck at home, and they're kind of passing the time by scrolling, shopping, just kind of doing things that, they wouldn't normally do, but they're still trying to interact. They're still trying to either invest in themselves. They're still trying to figure out what to do with that time. So there's still a lot of things happening. People are still adjusting to it. And it kind of goes back to that framework that we talked about roughly in week 10, which is trying to figure out, your own personal filter of how you look at this situation, right? There's a quote that assumptions lead to conclusions and conclusions kill dreams and ideas. And it's essentially that idea that if you think that the situation is pretty much only from your perspective, then you're going to miss a lot of the other opportunities in how you frame that situation, right? It goes back to week 10 when we're talking about that scarcity abundance perspective. Like while there is challenge and there is a lot of things shifting from away from what we've normally been used to, there still is a lot of opportunity and there's still ways to adjust to it and ways to channel that energy into, investing in yourself, right? So when you think about all of this, there's really two kind of main decisions, kind of going back to earlier in one of our talks where Einstein talks about, whether this is a friendly or hostile universe, right? You can either kind of spiral down this like panic rabbit hole and kind of think, we're all screwed, there's no hope and there's no solution, or you can, follow the teaching that we've been going through so far, which is very much in alignment with a lot of the situation, actually. You can adapt, you can kind of leave that BS behind, you can really invest in yourself, you can channel that energy into forming new beliefs and taking action, really focusing on developing that obstacle course racing technique. You can kind of challenge your mind and really focus on encouraging and elevating others and just stepping into that better version of yourself. Like those are all decisions you can make, but it comes down to how you frame the situation, whether it's a circumstance of, you know, uh, I can't do something, or I can do something. I'm going to have to do it differently than maybe I had assumed in the beginning, but there still is an option. I can figure this out, right? Everything's figure outable, and it just comes down to the framework that you want to approach. Like, are you working towards something? Are you empowering yourself to make decisions, or are you retreating into giving up? Those are really the ultimate frameworks that we're seeing play out right now in kind of our culture. So that kind of brings me to the next version of our program. Just kind of quick summary for those who maybe are newer to this program. The OCR Champion Life is basically over 7+ years of me kind of distilling obstacle course race training kind of into a really simple and easy to follow system. It's powered essentially by the 12-step Champion Life system, which really is going to have 3 essential tools. And those are going to be the first tool here, which is going to be the daily workouts and weekly mindset coaching. So moving forward, as we get into the next version of the program, the daily workouts are going to be on Beachbody On Demand, and then I'm going to add a weekly challenge workout to the actual content, just so that we can continue to kind of get those extra challenges during the week, and then just kind of have that kind of mix up for an additional touch point for just going through some of the more specific kind of exercises, but then also just kind of getting something that's a little bit more challenging and gives you kind of that extra weekly bump just to get through that week's work, right? With the Beachbody On Demand, we can kind of track through a periodized program, so you'll be able to build that cardiovascular and muscular endurance. And I can also kind of track your way through it and easily periodize a lot of what we're working towards, and then kind of drop in a few extra things in addition to that content. You'll also see on the back end, we'll be adding a run program to it as well. So this will all kind of neatly stack in on each other, and it's an easy way to gradually build without becoming too overwhelming. The next part, which is kind of still part of that first tool, but it's the weekly mindset coaching. Obviously, this is the last section of that. We've gone through all 12 of the teaching components. In this next version of the program, as you can see, I've kind of broken everything down into 3 major takeaways. For the next version of the program, each of these is going to be broken down into a week worth of a talk. So like for today, for example, we talked about influence and leadership and communities, and each of those would be a week's worth of a talk. So while the program is 12 weeks, we're just taking the C, the H, and the A as the first 3 months, and then the teaching points within those 3 takeaways will be the weeks. So for example, May would be, challenge the status quo or create a team culture. And the first week would be more on just kind of asking quality questions. That'll be the first week's talk. The second week's talk will be more on kind of the champions are on that journey of constant improvement. And then the third week would be more on prioritizing your time and understanding your beliefs and things like that. So it's going more in depth into actually accomplishing a lot of the high level things that we talked about, and just kind of continuing to delve deeper into a lot of these concepts. The second part is going to be on what I call the OCR game plan. And this is essentially the actual obstacle course technique tools. So we'll have the fundamental 8 teaching videos as our base. And then I'm going to be adding a couple more things in terms of going a little bit deeper into the technique, maybe more grip strength work, and just think about the whole week will be grip strength. So we focus on these techniques. And then this will be the specific obstacle we're practicing. It just gives you a little bit more time to really dial in that specific technique, and then also focus on just that foundational technique that you need to work on that applies to a lot of different obstacles, right? Like the same tactics for the wall will get you over a lot of other obstacles on the course. And it comes down to that level of grip strength, that level of upper body strength. And those are going to be common threads throughout a lot of these trainings. So it comes down to understanding the technique, but also understanding and recognizing that there are similarities that carry over to various other obstacles. So the foundational obstacles still apply. It just becomes getting more comfortable with that technique and then going through some of these other components, which are more about the understanding why you're racing in the first place, getting clear on how that race fits into your larger wellness goals, and then, ultimately what you want to accomplish within racing, like how you want to get through the race, how you want to feel during it, and then just thinking about what type of experience you want to have on the course. Is it more of a personal challenge? Do you want to, step into that better version of yourself? Is it just social outing with your friends, right? These will all change the way that you're approaching your training. And then the last component here is we're going to be talking about, just coaching and community. So you'll have access to a private membership learning portal, which will be through Kajabi. And this will be where all the obstacle racing technique is held. A lot of the PDFs and the spreadsheets and a lot of that mindset coaching will be in there. You can go through that at your own pace. But then in addition to this, for this next program, we'll have group coaching calls and then one-on-one calls. So this is how we'll stay on track through this program and just work through any type of sticking points that maybe come up during our coaching. So specifically with the coaching calls, I've broken it down into roughly a few phases, which I think I outlined on the next slide. But there's going to be 3 group coaching calls and then 3 one-on-one calls, and they all correspond with the milestones within this program. So the milestones are really broken up into roughly 3 phases, which are all related to each month of the program. So month 1 will be kind of the preseason phase, month 2 will be the regular season phase, and then month 3 will be kind of the playoff phase, where we're dealing with accelerating those skill sets and then keep working through that teaching map, which is the champion life, right? So think of the first 4 weeks will be that preseason part, the second 4 weeks will be that regular season, and then the last 3 weeks will be that playoffs, and then the fourth week within that final week will be the what I call the championship game, and that's when we'll see that kind of virtual race within the program. So every month will be kind of a fitness assessment, and then that final month will be the actual run through of the virtual race. So when you're looking at all of this put together, you're thinking about daily workouts, weekly mindset coaching, obstacle course racing technique videos, and then kind of that accountability so that you're staying on track through this program. So you can go through a lot of these at your own pace, and then we'll have kind of that keeping you on track for coaching and accountability. So a lot of this program had a lot of great success from a lot of members from all different skill sets and all different places. A lot of people have come in with a little bit of experience, but also some people have come in having never actually seen a course before. And this program's given them kind of that clarity and that understanding of how to get through that course, knowing what they need to focus on, and giving them the skills to actually succeed, on the course. There's a huge degree of, physical technique that you need to understand in order to get through this, but there's also a high degree of, mental components that you need to work on just to get through some of the obstacles that maybe are thrown at you on the course that, you hadn't prepared for, and you need to learn how to adjust on the fly, recognize, okay, this is part of this obstacle. I still trust my ability to figure this out. I can still get through this. And that's going to allow you to push through some of those obstacles and then kind of apply those lessons to your everyday life, and then actually become a little bit more of a leader and a little bit more influential person in your group. So when we're talking about this type of program, if you were to hire me as like your trainer, you're looking at about $120 an hour, and like a whole full day of training would be roughly about $1,200, which, a lot of my clients are okay with paying me, but, within the regards of a digital program, you won't have to pay anything near that. What we're looking at for this program, it's about $500. So when we're talking about the entire program, you're getting the daily workouts, bonus workouts included, weekly mindset lessons, fitness assessments every month with that virtual race. We're talking about that OCR game plan with the PDF, spreadsheets, checklists, technique training, all of that broken down in there. Any type of questions you have on obstacle racing, it's going to be in that second part. And then that third part is that accountability aspect, where I'm keeping you focused throughout the program and just keeping you moving forward during this, uncertain times where we're still working towards our goals. There is a payment plan for $197 as an option. And if you do commit to that full program, I am throwing in 2 bonuses, which are going to be specific kind of social media breakdown of technique for obstacle course racing. You'll see that a lot of people post a lot of content up there. I'm just going to kind of break down what I've seen on some of the wall climbs, some of the Herc-hoists, and then just some monkey bars, just some tactics I'll be continuing to update as we get through this program. But it's a great resource to just kind of dial in specific things that you want to test out and just kind of look at a very quick video and be like, oh, okay, this is what I need to work on. This is the technique they use. This is how I can get through it. So it's just a really good, helpful resource that you can quickly access and then just kind of, scan it, look through it, and then really understand like how to get through that technique that maybe you weren't able to practice before. And then the next bonus I'm going to throw in is just how to actually build your at-home gym. I know that's one of the questions that I've gotten recently from a lot of my clients is, where do I start with a lot of this training? What if I only have, what if I don't have dumbbells? What if I don't have a bench? So I'm going to walk you through on this 30-minute call how to actually set up your gym, starting with whatever you have, and we can work through, what your budget is for that gym, how to, get the fundamentals of what you need for this training, and then, figure out what works best for what you have at your disposal. And that's going to be for the paid in full version. So you're looking at all of those bonuses thrown in with the 3 components for this program. The only thing that I'm still working through, and this would be, I'll probably get some continued feedback on this one, is the start date for the program. I'm thinking early May, and I have a couple of time slots here. So this is where I'm going to kind of open it up for discussion here. I'm going to get out of this, stop share. Cool. Okay, cool. Hey, there's Thomas. Okay, so for the start time for the actual program, I have a couple of different options. I was thinking either like an April 29th, a May 1st, or a May 6th. What are you guys like thinking about in terms of when you'd want to jump into the next program? What is like a good idea for you guys? Because I have some frameworks here, but I kind of want to understand like what you guys are thinking about in terms of what you're looking at for your timelines.
Well, Thomas, you want to go first?
And I figured the background out, Thomas.
Oh yeah, hey.
Hey.
Hold on. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know. I mean, honestly, weekends are probably better for me than weekdays, but I mean, yeah, either one of those would probably work good. It's kind of a lot to digest there.
Yeah, no, it's a lot. So just kind of quick high level overview, basically, and I'll continue to follow up with you guys directly about it too. We can talk more about it, but essentially there's going to be kind of going at your own pace type of scenario within the program. And then the group coaching calls will just kind of be milestone calls. So we can technically start whenever is the majority, like best works for everybody. But the group coaching calls are what's going to be keeping us focused throughout the program, but you can get through kind of the rest of the content at your own pace. So I'll be like uploading the actual talks, so you don't have to worry about jumping on a specific call for the talks. That'll just be in there and we can go through it. I'll be like, okay, we're going through the daily checklist through various workouts. And then that'll be the daily check-ins. And then, every probably week or two, we'll have like one specific call. And then at the end of every like phase, which is roughly a month, we'll have our one-on-one calls just to make sure that we're all on the same page.
All right.
Yeah, so it's very much like a, within those 4-week phases of the training, I've broken it up into kind of front and back end of the phases. So it's kind of like you start a phase, we'll do a group coaching call, you finish the phase, we end up having a one-on-one call, then you move it in the next phase and we have a group coaching call. So it kind of stacks like that. So it's easier to digest the content, but you don't have to worry about like a lot of the things that I ran into with the first camp was people not being able to make the time slot or the location or, a lot of those elements. So we kind of removed that element. The content will be up there so you can go through it. And then the group coaching calls are the things you have to make, but I will record those as well. So
okay.
You'll still have that, and you're still going to have touch points with me if you have any specific questions as we go through, right?
All right.
And I'm in a situation where at some point I'm going to have to suddenly go back to my office, and it
Oh
could
yeah,
be like, Thomas, your whole industry's pretty
yeah,
impacted in a big way. Mine isn't. So, you know, right now with the rolling start dates, everyone's
yeah.
saying May 3rd or whatever.
Hmm.
I have a feeling it's going to go longer. So I'm right now, I'm
Absolutely.
being non-committal to everything because
Sure.
it could be, you know, next week they say, okay, show up May 3rd.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't have predictability in that way.
Mhm. Yeah, and then even within that, I mean, this model allows for a little bit more flexibility. So like if you were to miss call, like, you know, you can drop in on the Slack channel, send, you know, an email that way, or just, you know, respond to something directly or comment on one of the threads. So I'll still be able to respond to any type of questions that you have directly about it. And I'll still have, you know, follow-up lessons for you to do for each section. So there'll still be
Yeah.
elements. Go ahead.
Oh, in that it's also partially a time thing too, though, because right now I have more time because I don't have a commute. So
Right,
I
right.
found 2 hours a day.
Sure, 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 sure.
Once I'm back, I lose those 2 hours a day. So I just need to feel things out.
Yeah, yeah, and that's part of it. I think that's kind of coming up with, okay, what works best, then be like, okay, like here are the milestone check marks that you need to make, and then, you know, try to get the best of whatever you can make on the backside. The fitness component is going to be the general fitness component throughout. I'll try to drop in like the challenge workout to have an element of like the cardiovascular element that maybe you won't get. We'll have the run coaching in addition to that. So there'll be like things stacked on top of each other that you can kind of like, okay, I can get to this. Probably not gonna be able to get to that. I can get to that. So you can still piece it together as you move through. Cool. So let's see. So we'll probably, I'm gonna aim for probably May 6th seems like a good time frame, unless that's too far out. I think it's a Wednesday. It's like after Cinco de Mayo. I don't know if
Yeah,
that
no,
matters.
yeah, I think that would work.
Okay.
Yeah,
Cool. So
and that's the week. I just don't know which way
Mhm.
things are gonna go on my end.
For sure, for sure. So we'll aim for that, and then we'll say the May 6th, and that's probably going to end around July 29th. So that's roughly a 12-week period, and then I'll kind of send out the list for what those call frames would be and all of that. And we'll still keep the Venmo for right now as kind of the payment processing for now, and then it'll eventually carry over to kind of the other thing as, you know, I do build everything else on the back end. But that's kind of the framework. We'll keep what I'll do with the calls that are kind of like this is I'll essentially record them, and then as I go through them, and then just kind of drop them in a database so you can access them. And then it'll just be going through the program. I'll drop in some of the specific workout content, and then we'll get into kind of the actual technique. And then that's what we'll focus on the calls is a little bit more of the technique, and maybe a section on what we covered for the talks.
So I have one kind of unrelated question, but maybe the two of
Sure.
you have some good ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people in the OCR world probably do plan around particular races.
Yep.
With the goal setting right now, that's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
struggling with the most.
Yeah.
Is, you know, before my goal was to be really consistent about going to the gym. And I'm actually really good about that. And even now I'm being very consistent. But it's hard to build and you don't have a kind of a reach goal. You can't just be
Sure.
keep doing the same. It can't be that there's an OCR, you know, in July.
Right.
What suggestions do you have about either of you in that?
So
regard?
what I would say, I'm trying to structure the program in a way that there will be benchmarks and there will be ways to track this. The fit test is kind of like where your starting point is, so we can work on getting better numbers at that. But the whole like 3-month program is designed to work towards a race. So what I can do, depending on how this works out, is maybe instead of like just have the fitness test at like on week like 1 or 2, and then like maybe week 11 have the fitness test again, and then at the end of the month just have mini virtual races leading up to the bigger race. So that way you have like every month has like a little mini race or a fitness assessment, and that way you can kind of work towards that as kind of your mile marker almost. That I think is a good way to keep focused on things. after that, it becomes more of like, what you want to accomplish, like whether it's a pull-up or things like that. Getting towards those metrics and then kind of working towards those. I mean, there's an infinite number of things to do there, right? So it just becomes like those elements, but I'll try to keep the like every month having some type of marker to work towards.
Okay.
Yeah, that way it's a little bit more engaging, because I have noticed that as well. Like, for example, Spartan Race has their like trifecta thing that they do, and I have a virtual trifecta. So I'm trying to create like a, roughly like every month has like a like check and run through almost of like a virtual race simulation, leading up to more progressively difficult ones as we get later into the program.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that what I found is that like the race is oftentimes like when you actually break down the race, like, because you're not really like, there's not really that much equipment during the race, right? It becomes like a lot of running and a lot of like, body weight stuff. And it becomes just your time overall, right? Like that's pretty much what the whole Spartan Race thing is. It's like getting your running time down faster, and then, getting through the obstacles in a more efficient way. So those things still apply. It just becomes now we're transitioning a little bit of that into like more trail running and more body weight stuff. So, cool. All right, so that's pretty much all I had for today. I will follow up with you guys as well, just kind of as we move closer to those mile markers. And I'll just kind of be circling back with you guys just kind of about this program, just getting your thoughts about it, and then kind of setting you up for the next program as well.
Cool. Sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Thomas. Thanks for jumping on.
See you.
Good to see you guys.
Cool. Bye. Bye.